Okay, I'm coming to you from between the devil and the deep blue sea here, and I thought getting geared up for turkey hunting, and so I'll break out the guns, clean them up, oil them, go over them once again, make sure everything works, and I thought I'd take time uh, to talk about some mods I've done on this gun. My camo, my paint job. My thoughts on paint, camo paint for a gun, and another mod, two mods I did on this one. But this is a 1300 Winchester, and I acquired it. I think it was in 1985. I worked with a fella that you see that it's empty here. I worked with a fella that that had FFL. Oh, one more thing, I gotta come right back. Just realized while I'm at it, I may as well talk about this too. Let me go through this thing. So anyway, I got this this shotgun. It's a 1300 Winchester. It's featherweight. And after several years of putting tape on it and getting disgusted with a sticky gun and having to put it on and take it off, I just finally decided to paint it and call it a day. And so it's more rust proof as a result, and a lot less maintenance. I don't have to no longer have to wax or oil the outside. And just touch up the paint once in a while. It came with a brass bead. What I've done here is, in the turkey woods, this green, if I can get it to focus, like a fluorescent green. And what I did is, came with a brass bead. I painted it with white paint, degreased it real good, painted with white paint. And then once it was white, then I paint this fluorescent paint over top. And that really shows up good in the spring when a lot of times it's brighter in the spring. But and then the other thing I've done here, I made this rear, and this is mostly for, I don't know why it's not wanting to focus, but I made this peep. There we go. It's a little bit better. We can look down, once I remove the barrel, we can look down that peep. But I made this peep because when we're turkey hunting, we're aiming this thing like a rifle. And right at the turkey's, right at his wattles, about halfway up his neck, to center that pattern. And because we're usually sitting down against a tree, maybe almost laying back like you would in a chase lounge, we want to make sure we got our cheek down on the stock, or somehow make sure that we actually sight right down the rib. On my son's shotgun here, the old school way, they did that. They put they called it a mid-rib bead. So there's a bead here, and then this bead down on the end. And what you do is you line the two beads up, and that rib draws your eye. That rib helps draw your eye to. Let's see here. I can get it to focus. Doesn't really like to do that. But so that's how they did it then. This gun didn't come with that. This gun came with just the bead. So as far as my my camo preference is, I'm a big believer, for lack of a better term, believer in counter shading. And if you notice, animals in the wild, they almost invariably are counter shaded, so they're darker on they're lighter on the underbelly than they are in the back and the top. And some, I forget his name, but some naturalists finally realized that back in the Victorian era. Some British naturalist in India, I believe, he noticed the counter shading, and what it does is where there normally would be a shadow cast by an object underneath it, we have this lighter color. So as this thing sits here, in firing position, any gun that I'm going to paint like this, I tend to make it darker on the top and lighter on the bottom, and a lot of the other stuff is secondary. Some of the darker spots might break it up, but I'm not convinced. Even doing this, I'm not totally convinced how well or how much something like a turkey cares about that stick that doesn't look quite right. It doesn't, a big thing, I think, as long as it doesn't shine and it's not moving around fast enough to catch their attention. But I'm going to pull this thing off here. Pull the barrel off. And we're going to look at that. Look at some of the stuff there. This is my fancy sling. But let's see if we can get this thing lined up. So there it is there. Not sure that it's gonna focus all that well, but maybe got to go against that darker background. But that's it there. It's just not quite as open as I'd like it to be, but it really forces me to get that, make sure that barrel's aligned. Because what can happen is people miss high on turkeys. They don't quite get their head because they're forced try to get their head down on the stock. Now, I talked about the other day, that'd be a good place for this would be a good place for a red dot, or like my sidearm here has that forward mounted stock. That would be a good application if there was a good way to mount that scope out on this barrel. But anyway, so that's made that work. It's see if we can get this to focus. I'll put a couple set screws in each side here, and they just clamp down on the sides of the rib and drill the hole. Drill the hole through it. It could possibly go a little bit bigger and make that a little bit more of a ghost ring setup, but or even open up the top. But it works. It served me well. I've killed a whole bunch of turkeys with this gun. But then the other thing I've done here is I made this reamer and cutting edges here to cut the forcing cone. So I cut the a lot of times in these production guns, the forcing cone right at the end of the where the shell would open up. I think I got one. I don't think I got a fired shell right here, but right where the shell inside the chamber where the shell would open up, there's another reduction down to the 12 gauge bore diameter. The shell's a little bit over bore diameter, and then there's a step. That transition is it's like a shoulder like this, and that inside that chamber going into the barrel, and that's a sort of a pinch point there. And what some of the guys that some of the shotgun experts will say that you get a lot of pellet deformation when that transition like that is that shoulder is harsh instead of angled like this. So I made this reamer just to go in there and just to open that little spot open just a little bit. And so, and I'm not sure, ultimately, I can't swear to it being any better as far as patterning better. What I have noticed is you get some good shells, like the I use those Winchester Longbeard. They call it shot lock technology or something like that. But what they've done with those, if they encased the shot in a resin, and then that resin will break on firing, and it leaves all your pellets around. And I've hammered turkeys at 45 plus paces. I have a video of that one. Just knocked them flat with those shells, and what they do is they because they don't have deformed pellets, and the pellets stay around. And we did a count. We fired this gun at a piece of newspaper at 40 paces and counted. We calculated how many, there were number 6. I use mostly number 6 shot for turkey. We counted how many, we calculated how many number 6 were in that shell. And the Uper sat there and he counted all the holes. And within a tiny margin of error, they were all in that paper. And we're talking a paper that's, 24 inches by 24 inches. That's a dead turkey all day long. So, and none of the other shells I've ever used has patterned that well. So that was a game changer. I'm going to stick with those until they don't make them anymore. But, so that's the shells. Let's see, I take them out here. The other thing I liked about them too is they're much more durable. They're much more durable shell. They because that shot is encapsulated, and these are the ones I'm using. These here. I've loaded my own shells. It's in this resin that crumbles on firing. But if you look at here, I started to say I've made my own shells, and they pattern good. I killed birds with them. It was something to do, but when I got a hold of these and I tried them, it wasn't worth looking for those the super loads for the shotgun. I can't match them. Anyway, here's the older style with the 6-point crimp, and then it looks like they heated it and kind of melted it in the center. And these are okay, but what happens when you load these when they're in that magazine and you've got that on the end of that spring, there's a sheet metal cup that pushes on this. And not so much the rounds that end up behind, but this front round, well, that cup will push the center in, and it'll mess the crimp up. And before you know it, all that, if there's a buffer, like here you can hear these, some of them rattle. There's a buffer in with that, and the buffer worked kind of okay, but these will start to leak. It'll wreck the shell before you ever get a chance to fire it. So they come along and they made these shells with the resin in them, and it turns the shot column right now is just a solid. We could take it out of here and it would look like a whitish cylinder with little copper BB showing. And they just put this disc, it looks like a crimp, but this is I can show here. That's just a plastic disc with lines through it. It's just a wad, and then they roll crimp. So this hull is the lip of it is rolled back in like that, rolled over. That's how the crimp goes. You can see how it goes. Should be able to see how it goes back in. I wish it would focus more. It would focus better. Let's see. Having a hard time. That was better. Anyway, they're more durable. They kill birds a long way off, and so we like them. So those are the shells. You can see that too in some of my videos. You'll see, if you watch a video where we're shooting a turkey, you'll see it almost looks like a muzzleloader fired, because it looks like there's like a white cloud that comes out of the gun. And what it is that resin. So that's that. A tool. That's probably not something I'd mess with again. It was something I had time for at the time, and I did that. But I have I have rods to I have some cleaning rods to clean my guns, but there's something I always carried with me. You never know with the shotgun, especially with a shotgun. You got such a big bore. You take a tumble, you take a header. You get some dirt in the barrel. It's easy enough to have this with you, and then drop it from the breech end. Drop it from the breech end and pull it through. You have to unload the gun and take it out. But a lot of times that's all I do. I run that through and see if I'm happy with mostly got everything. I mean, there's maybe some streaks in there, but I haven't shot the gun like shooting at targets in a long time, so it doesn't get dirty that way. What happens is we'll get dirt, and it's some days in the spring when it's really dry and the dust is coming up. But what else here? Here's another. And I like these, I gotta say, I probably haven't had a gun that hasn't had something end up going wrong with it. And you think, well, that's not very good, but in the big picture, if you use something for years and it finally starts giving you trouble, it's just how mechanical things are. But so, fire control group, and bolt carrier. I'll look it over. When I bought this thing, I kind of opened it up and I took some fine stones and kind of felt for edges that I didn't think should remain, and I knocked them off and put it back together. I don't over oil my guns. I just make sure there's not a lot of powder or grit in here. Guns aren't running they don't run like a reciprocating engine where you got to have constant oil on the friction surfaces. They need very little. A lot of times we'll over lubricate. But this back on. Come in here. Come in here and wipe the dust out. It's got, you can tell it's got some oil on the surface. But here's one of the things that was giving me fits on this gun, or for a little bit. But what they had done when I bought it, that double bar there is actually the ejector. And what it has is it's got this little catch. Let me get the pointer here. It's got this little catch right here, this area where the rim of that shell will hit that, and it'll kick the shell out of the gun. But on this gun, it can handle 2 3/4 and 3-inch shells, so that's got to be able to slide back that 1/4 inch or so to accommodate the longer shells. And so what they have here in the rear, there's a hole. There's a hole with that spring, and there's a pin that goes into a little slot in that piece. And that holds it in back there. And then the only thing holding it in up front when I first bought it was this, let's see if you can see it. It was this recess in here. Put the light on that better. It was that recess right there. Right in there. See it there? So that's what the tip of that ejector slid into. This this tip right here. Right there. That piece would go into there. What would happen is this spring would bow up like this and pop out of that recess. And then one time I was out duck hunting and this ejector shot up into the barrel. Luckily, it shot into the barrel and not into the swamp. So I put it back and I started looking and I found out they added this little clip. You see this, you see the part of that doesn't move there, just where my finger just hit. It clips around. There's a little hook that goes around right here, and then one right here, and it goes around this piece. And I had to get, there's a screw for it in there. There's the screw right there that holds that in. And I had to get those, their gun store, I think it was Wessel's. But I had to drill this hole from the inside and tap for that screw that clip in there. And now it's holding, now this has never had a problem since. This ejector, it's the same one that came with the gun. It's never came out of location again. So here's the piece I was talking about. It's ultimately this piece here is what tears up your the crimps on your shells over time. Those turkey loads they got a lot of recoil, and so your shells are, they're shuttling back and forth in here when you fire the gun. I mean, if you haven't fired any, they'll get your attention. But so that's it. I put it back together, and then we talked about the sighting arrangement and talked about a couple mods, little things, but you think 85, 50 I've had this for 35 years, and I've used it every year, spring and fall. It's been in the swamp. It's been in, it's been in the river. I got out of, was going duck hunting down the Black River, and by the time we got to the end at night, it was duck hunting. But it ended up with all that river water getting in it, and then rain, and I got home, and it was packed with